This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, what to do about the homeless became an even bigger issue this week as the city prepares for some major events, and the state wants to clear occupied land. For the homeless, the moving continues. NOPD officers who were hoping to be moved to a higher rank are still waiting at a stop sign, though there is some suspicion that the delay may be allegedly due to political retaliation. We'll be looking at these stories as well as alleged misbehavior by an Orleans DA's office prosecutor, a former prosecutor. On a court of a different type, the Pelicans have begun a new season facing high hoops and higher hopes, plus visions of a new arena. And with Election Day near, we will examine the impact of balloting that has already been done because of the new popularity of early voting. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol, Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Missy Wilkinson, staff writer, The Times-Picayune, The New Orleans Advocate, Mike Pearlstein, investigative reporter, WWL, Louisiana, Channel 4. I'm going to go over to E first because we heard this week about some homeless encampments being broken up and folks moved away. It sort of disturbed the city officials because it's not in accordance with their plan.
Well, it is a state property, and so the state says, well, we have a right to do this. There were some city officials who say, well, look, we have a plan that we've been working on, and this is interfering with our plan. Like Nathaniel Fields, who heads the homeless office, says by doing this, if you move them to another place, they're going to scatter. We won't know where they are, and so when we want to do something else, we won't have contact with them. The impetus, like the headlines around the country, have been saying they were, they were doing it because of the concert this week, the Taylor Swift concert, and that may have been. But I can tell you, it's been going on all over. Throughout the city. I can tell you, near where I live in Mid-City, there was, at the foot of Canal Street by the cemeteries, that's for a long time been a gathering of people trying to collect money every day. And then, for a couple of years now, I don't know if they were camping out, but they were kind of like picnicking, I guess, alongside the cemeteries. Then one day they were all gone. Mm-hmm. And so somebody did something to encourage them to move every so often. You'll see one and so there is an effort out there. But what's happened here, this is it's a site under the I-90 overpass by the corner of what we in New Orleans call Calliope Street. Mm-hmm. The rest of the world calls it Calliope, by Calliope and Loyola. And the state police went in and started moving him. From what I can tell, politely told him, you got to relocate, and helped him relocate to a smaller site, not too far away on South Robinson Street. So at least which is really kind of more out of public view. And so they started doing that this week and seemed to have some success. And one day they came in and they put up fences, and supposedly that the state police were even at the new site and grilling hamburgers and just trying to make it a little bit better. So, it's such a sensitive issue. And so that issue went on, but it's going to be an ongoing issue. And of course, to the extent that it is involved by the site to visitors, we got the Super Bowl coming in, so we're going to probably see more of these types of issues.
Well, the city does have its plan for housing the homeless and has been moving people into some housing. And so they were rather upset that this, as you noted, sort of disrupted that schedule. Yeah. And we're really asking that they not do it, but the state went ahead and did it. So they are directing these people to a different site.
Yeah. Well, Councilmember Helena Marino wrote a letter to the governor that says, please don't do this. Give us a chance to direct the program. And that wasn't answered. Of course, it couldn't have answered it in time for this. And so, there's an effort by the city, but when it's on state property, the state can do what it wants. And that's what happened this week.
Okay. But I can tell you that just today, a civil court judge issued an injunction in a lawsuit filed on behalf of two of the unhoused population for the state police to stand down. Mm-hmm. So now it's going into the courts. Yeah. and the ruling there was no due process, that whether you're, I think the language was, whether you're in a mansion or sleeping in a tent outside, you have the same rights. It's a tricky and somewhat intractable issue. We obviously have our own, homeless issues, but this is, not New Orleans' own problem alone. It's seen sometimes in much greater degree in other cities, and it is, it's a very difficult problem to resolve for so many reasons. Lack of housing, number one, and as you clear encampments in one area, encampments sprout up in other areas. And now we've seen it, less under the, the overpass leading to the Crescent City connection, but pop up in other areas of the city. Now we do have, as you mentioned, the New Orleans city efforts, and one of their arguments, and I guess criticizing this state approach, was that some of these homeless people had vouchers and were just sort of waiting, I think in a matter of weeks, when housing was going to become available. So they were trying to tell the state, no, look, we have a plan. And I think one of the biggest issues was a lack of communication between state officials and city officials.
Yeah, so, but for right now, an injunction on moving out anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it might be a little, from driving by there earlier, it might be a little, too little too late in that they've moved most of the encampment. It has gone 2 blocks, up Calliope.
But as you note, I mean, it is an ongoing problem, and not just for the city of New Orleans. It's certainly in the urban areas too. Okay, thanks a lot, both of you guys. Missy, let's go on over to you, because some promotions of high-ranking positions in the New Orleans Police Department put on hold.
Yes, and the reasons why are still, to some extent, a matter of speculation, but they're very gravely concerning. Pretty much what happened was last month there were a number of ranks that were being tested for promotion. Among them were captains and majors. So on September 23rd, the list of people and their scores, came out. About a week or so later, the chief met with upper management, or I guess upper leadership at NOPD, and said that nobody from that list was going to be promoted, which really prompted a firestorm of questions. Understandably, these people have studied really hard for the test. They have taken it, they've prepared, and now nobody's being promoted. And at that time, the chief didn't offer a good explanation why. She just said that there had been complaints. A couple of days ago, I asked her about that. And she said that it was a mutual decision between her and the mayor to pause the proceedings and pause the promotions. And she said that the mayor had, quote, opinions about the list of people who were eligible for those promotions. And while she did not share what the opinions were, she said she wasn't ready to go into that. She did say that, the proceedings were on hold for now while they revamp and look at and kind of examine the test procedure and whether it was fair, whether bias came in at any step in the process, including potentially from the mayor and City Hall. It's currently being investigated by the federal monitors who oversee the consent decree compliance. And also, some of the police labor organizations have petitioned the Department of Civil Service, which administers part of the test, to do an investigation.
Okay, so the positions were for major and captain, is that correct?
Those were the two that were problematic.
Okay.
Those were the two lists that were at least temporarily thrown out and may or may not be salvaged to use in future promotions.
And so the people who were up for those possible promotions on that list were some individuals from the Public Integrity Bureau, right?
Yes.
Who had overseen the Jeffrey Vappy investigation too. So is that sort of raising some questions?
Yes, it is. In the petition from the PANO, the Police Association, the labor union, they do allege retaliation, basically that they believe that the mayor did not like the names on the list, and that is why she froze it, basically, because 2 of the officers that were up for those promotions were involved in the Public Integrity Bureau investigation of Vappy, who has since been indicted on wire fraud and lying to the FBI, basically.
And so the position of the major, there hadn't been promotions to that position for, 30 years? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So there had been about 34 years since the majors had been tested, or that role had been kind of actively filled. I think there's 1 major on the force right now, but what I'm told from officers is that they think it's a useful position to have, and they had been petitioning for a while to bring it basically back into life, but they hadn't made any headway with it until this chief and she agreed to kind of put it back and bring it back to life.
And so concerns about how this potentially could impact the consent decree.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of intersecting issues here that really affect potentially compliance, and that is why federal monitors are looking into it too and putting together their report. You know, there have been a lot of concerns brought to them about this process from officers and from whistleblowers. And what we see here is really an intersection of a lot of the things that brought the department under federal oversight in the first place. You know, we see perhaps a lack of transparency. We see bias and subjectivity being interjected. There are the allegations that there's kind of like this cronyism or favoritism, you know, coming from City Hall potentially. And that is really all the stuff that we had worked to dismantle over the last decade.
So this is all, it all goes it should go according to a procedure, all protected by civil service. Is that correct?
Yeah, so this is, half of it is, the scoring is half a test that's administered by civil service, or it's actually not scored by them. There's actually an outside agency that scores that test, and it apparently cost the city $103,000 to do this last round of tests. So if we scrap the test, that's a substantial sum of money down the drain. But so they do half of it, and the other half is kind of like background materials that gets reviewed like interior review from chiefs at NOPD. So it's a hybrid model right now. But what our chief, Kirkpatrick, is proposing is a move to completely outside review, to eliminate any potential for bias or even the appearance of bias. And our independent police monitor is on board with that too.
But one of the issues being raised by Pano and others is that this procedure is relatively new, and it's the administration's procedure, blessed by the mayor and the administration, and now allegedly names pop up on the top of the list that the mayor didn't like, and suddenly their own process is not good enough. So that's raising a lot of questions. And also consider, the one maybe biggest late speed bump in the consent decree was PIB and the investigation of Jeffrey Vappy. There was a whole investigation, report, hearing, and the judge issued a scathing report that stopped just short of sanctions because Chief Kirkpatrick stepped in and said, no, we have a remediation plan. And now here that issue, at least a tangent issue is raising itself with these promotions that have been blocked.
Raising itself and raising some eyebrows too. So, okay, we'll see how that goes. All right, thanks a lot, both of you guys. Okay, Mike, we're going to stick with you right now too, because you had a piece about something else raising some eyebrows. Is a videotape that surfaced that you found regarding dealing with a former prosecutor. He's no longer with the DA's office. Tell us about that.
Well, interesting origins, and I'll kind of peel back the curtain a little bit into my journalistic process here, but it was the day after St. Patrick's Day of this year that a prosecutor, Walker McInturf, with the Orleans Parish DA's office, prosecutor for a couple years, which a couple years meant he's a frontline prosecutor, a senior in a section conducting trials and accepting guilty pleas. He was fired. St. Patrick's Day coming on a Sunday. By Monday, he's not at work, despite a whole docket of trials and upcoming cases. Another assistant DA was fired along with him, who was apparently with him at St. Patrick's Day, involved in something that led the DA's office to determine that's a firing offense. And the courthouse was just abuzz with rumor and speculation and what happened, and reports of something during some St. Patrick's Day festivities, and that there may be a video floating around that kind of shows the transgressions. So, like any journalist, and I'm sure others, were in pursuit of said video, because especially on TV, there's nothing like good video that speaks for itself.
And you got to tell us what that video.
Well, anyway, I pursued it for quite a while, and I determined that yes, video exists, and that yes, it had been sent to the DA's office. But lo and behold, that video was not from St. Patrick's Day. It was from some much earlier incident, more than a year earlier. And so that led me to first get my hands on the video, which I did, and then the whole disciplinary file of this attorney, Walker McInturf. And it was quite revealing. That video showed, it was taken in an Uber or a rideshare, and it shows McInturf using a racial slur, lots of profanity, and talking about seeking cocaine. Now, there's no cocaine in the video. There's no cocaine ever found, no charges related to that. But for someone who goes to court pointing the finger of guilt, putting people in prison for cocaine, it raises a red flag.
And after that video was shot, he did do that. He prosecuted cases, right?
He continued to prosecute cases. So my question there was, what action did or did not the DA's office take when they got this video? And sure enough, they did discipline him. And it was one of the most interesting disciplinary letters I've ever that I've ever seen, in which it basically starts as the Orleans Parish DA's office has decided not to terminate you, but instead had a three-step plan of action. One is redacted, relating to whatever it falls under, kind of health and personal privacy, potentially some kind of treatment program, but also some sensitivity training, 1 hour of sensitivity diversity training, and then a promise never to do anything to hold the office in disrepute again. And that was enough in the eyes of the DA's office for him to continue. He returned. Whatever happened on St. Patrick's Day was strike two, immediate dismissal.
Any comment from the DA's office?
Yeah, they did provide the documents, and their statement was basically, we don't go into, personal and health matters. We sought out, the former assistant DA. He did not respond. But really, what was raised by some of the people in the courthouse crowd, especially among defense attorneys, is this the kind of person we want to have in a majority black city using a racial slur, caught, but continued to prosecute for many months until something happened a second time.
All right, we'll wait for your next report on that. Okay,
Sure.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Okay, E, folks, early voting. I know I did. I got my little sticker.
Yeah, early voting is a relatively new phrase in American politics. There used to be absentee voting, which you used to always hear. Well, absentee voting meant you were going to be out of town. You had to sign a statement, say, I'm not going to be here. Early voting, you don't have to sign a statement. You just say, I want to vote. And I think the idea is just to get people out there voting earlier. So there was a designated period this year. It was October 18th through October 28th, which is Tuesday, not counting Sundays. So don't plan to go on Sunday. But people can go and vote for whatever reason they want to. They can vote. But I think an impact it's having is that by looking at the returns, people who analyze politics, they look at polls and they look at different kind of data. This is another data point out there, because we know as of last Tuesday, 15% of the registered voters in Louisiana had voted already. And that kind of shows, a little bit of a spark. But out of those, most of them were Republican. That more Republicans have voted Democrats, even though there are more registered Democrats than Republicans in Louisiana. And in the past, more Democrats have voted early than Republicans, but you're seeing either less interest in Democrats or more interest in Republicans. So people can analyze those things, okay? And I think it has an effect if people know that, to imagine campaigns, they know there's like 3 weeks before the election, and they say, hey, look, here's the point where we need to work. And another impact it's going to have is that a lot of campaigns, when they made up their campaign calendar, they had these things that would happen in the last few days. Well, now the last few days are like 3 weeks before the election. And so I think that's going to have a big impact too. And the amazing thing, though, is I think a lot of people are doing early voting because they're saying, well, we want to avoid long lines. There aren't going to be long lines. Especially in Orleans. There's presidential. It's not like anybody's going to debate, well, who am I going to vote for? By the time you vote for president, there's a couple of charter amendments, constitutional amendment, and a few small school board elections. In most of the state, there's no major elections, so it's not like you're avoiding that. But if people just feel better about going out there, it's happening.
No, I went midweek in Jefferson Parish, and very, very smoothly run, and a constant stream of people. You really didn't have to wait very long at all. Hardly at all. In and out, and just like I said, really, really smoothly done. But it was a steady stream of people. So that was on Wednesday. So, I don't count on that percentage that you just gave. It was 15%. So we'll see by the end of the week how many of our voters in the state have gone to early vote.
And there was one news source, Illuminated, that raised the question, will Democrats be recharged by seeing that they're really trailing behind because of early voting. In the past, that's information they wouldn't have had. And
Right.
so that could have an impact.
And one thing that I'll add is, as long as I've been voting here in Louisiana, especially with so much controversy in other states about, our elections fair, longer lines, I've never had any problem or issue voting. We always get very quick results. The process itself seems to be quick, seamless.
Yep.
I can't ever remember waiting in a long line, maybe 20 minutes at the busiest of elections.
Yeah.
So that's one of the areas where Louisiana seems to get it right.
Louisiana has always been very good at running elections. It goes back to a guy named Wade Morton, who was Secretary of State. But we were one of the first states to have the electronic voting machines, and then whatever else came that was new, Louisiana went to it. And so we were good at the machinery of elections and at the counting.
Okay, so early voting continues to Tuesday, this coming Tuesday.
Right, but don't go Sunday.
All right, yes, okay, all righty, thanks a lot. Okay, let's wrap up with you and let's talk about the Pelicans. And we want to make this good news right now. So they started their regular season.
Okay, it's a good news, bad news scenario. Of course, they played their opener, won, looked great, and the way I look at it is, they revamped their roster and really swapped out two major positions of need, being center and point guard. And on the court, in that opening game against the Bulls, both of those positions looked like what a great upgrade. A draft pick, Yves Misi at center, looked like the rim protector that we've been dying for many, many years. And then the big blockbuster trade of the offseason for the Pelicans was getting DeJounte Murray. From Atlanta, we had to give up a lot of players to get him, but finally a true point guard, a true court general, something that the Pelicans just have not had. And he looked fantastic. He had 10 assists, and in the fourth quarter, broke his hand.
Oh,
so he's out an estimated 4 to 6 weeks. That's a setback. Now, mind you, this was a game that didn't feature the biggest Pelican star, Zion Williamson, out with illness, and we'll see if he plays tonight in Portland against the Trailblazers. But I don't know, some people were just kind of cringing that the Pelicans had been hit in previous recent years by really unfortunate injuries, a lot to Zion, who's had trouble staying on the court, Brandon Ingram at key times, the other former All-Star. And so a mixed opening, but the good news is DeJounte Murray's hand is not a shooting hand, it's left hand, it's going to heal. He had surgery, they call it successful.
Good.
And hopefully in 4 weeks on the short end of that recovery period, we get him back, and that chemistry with a new point guard can really take off.
It's just the beginning, just the beginning. Okay, let's talk real quickly now with this talk about a new arena, or at least an improved arena.
Well, and credit to TimesPicayune.com for breaking a story where there was kind of a facility review of the Smoothie King Arena, and it is the oldest, arena and one of the smallest arenas in the NBA. And that report showed a lot of not keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak, as other cities upgrade and add amenities, add seats, add sort of high-end, club boxes. And the issue with the Smoothie King Arena is that it's a small footprint and it doesn't lend itself really easily to the kind of expansion that we've seen in other cities. Now, the other solution, we saw this in Milwaukee. They had the most decrepit and oldest stadium, and that's a good team, Milwaukee Bucks. They completely, built a new arena, cost over $1 billion, and it doesn't look like the state of Louisiana is inclined to build a whole new arena. The Smoothie King Center has been around since 1999, and remember, really interesting how that all came about. It was really Build It and They Will Come by Mark Morial. Didn't have a team, didn't even have a team available at the time they built this thing, and there it stood mostly empty.
And because Charlotte did not want to build a new arena.
Well, that's what ended up happening. But there were some close calls. We thought maybe some of the Texas teams might relocate, like San Antonio, small market like us. And then the big one was the Minnesota Timberwolves. If you remember, one of the great, now funny, but at the time infamous, front page headlines was "We got him," or "We got him," when there was the report of the Timberwolves relocating. Of course, that did not happen. It turned out to be an embarrassing Dewey beats Truman type headline. But eventually, when Charlotte, as you mentioned, voted not to build a new arena for their outdated facility. We end up with the Hornets. They become the Pelicans. Right. Everyone says it's football territory, and we see the renovations to the Superdome at over $500 million just completed. Looks great. And now the question is going to be raised, what about Smoothie King?
What's attendance like for the basketball games?
Well, the season just started with the opener. They're on the road for, I think, 4 games before they return. Now, the capacity is, over 17,000. It's at the low end, but it's, in the range of other NBA arenas. But one of the issues, raised by the NBA is that the lower bowl, which is the higher price seats, it often comes with amenity like, access to club lounges and things like that, is one of the smallest in the league, if not the smallest. And that's what the NBA is trending toward, becoming kind of a glitzy, high-end entertainment.
Yeah, but we also want a ticket price that's affordable for our community.
And we are the most reasonably priced ticket in all of the NBA. I think the league would rather see that scale up a little bit. I know that there will always be nosebleed seats in the upper bowl that you can get reasonably. I think what they want to add is the high-end amenities, and is there going to be some room for that in the existing footprint?
We'll see. Right now, we're just starting the season, and we wish them luck, and for everybody to get healed and be healthy.
Heal quickly. Stay healthy.
Okay. All right, Mike. Thanks. E, over to you for other stories.
When you say it's the oldest in the league, it's only 25 years old.
That's right.
To me, it's still the new arena.
Things progress quickly.
Okay. If you miss Taylor Swift this weekend, but you really want to go, next weekend you go to Indianapolis. She's going to have 3 nights, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in Indianapolis.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. Taking the U.S. by storm. Okay. Over to you, Missy.
So other stories regarding the mayor and the NOPD, there's still this percolating lawsuit lodged by Ann Bro and alleging that Cantrell violated her civil rights when she slapped her with what amounted to a bogus restraining order. Cantrell's team had asked to stay that, anticipating an indictment being handed down, but that was denied, and it is moving forward.
Okay, we'll see where that one goes. Mike?
I just want to take a moment to offer my best wishes and healing thoughts to my colleague and good friend, Eric Paulson, a TV legend, really, in New Orleans, a longtime fixture on the morning show and news at WWL, Louisiana. As he announced himself on his Facebook, he's battling cancer. He did, say it is the fight of his life, and I can tell you that's true. So for all those inclined to prayer or best wishes or healing thoughts, we really want that for Eric.
All of the above for Eric. We wish him and his family just all good wishes and prayers, as you said. All right, guys, thanks so much for being here, and we thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
This program is brought to you in part by the Eugenie and Joseph Jones Family Foundation, a local foundation proud to support education, the arts, and culture in the greater New Orleans area.